working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles. You're watching ASEAN in Focus on tonight's headlines. Beijing is pointing fingers at the U.S., blaming them for a recent incident in the South China Sea last week. A Chinese plane crossed in front of an American surveillance aircraft, causing tensions to rise between the two nations. President Marcos Jr. highlighted the need for the government to step up its efforts in achieving the country's rice self-sufficiency target of 97%. Mutually reinforcing crises, including rising debt levels, are disproportionately affecting developing countries, worsening the global employment divide between high-income and low-income countries, widening existing inequalities exacerbated by the pandemic, according to a new report from the International Labour Organization. In a heartwarming initiative to support individuals with dementia, residents at a care home in Singapore came together to hold hands and dance to beloved classics from the past. With the help of a silent music format, they swayed and grooved to golden oldies spanning the 40s to the 80s, all while enjoying the music through their headphones. Beijing is pointing fingers at the U.S., blaming them for a recent incident in the South China Sea. Last week, a Chinese plane crossed in front of an American surveillance aircraft, causing tensions to rise between the two nations. When asked about the incident, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning accused the U.S. of continuously sending ships and planes to conduct close surveillance on China.
On your first question, I want to point out that for over the years, the U.S. has sent aircraft for reconnaissance against China, which seriously undermines China's sovereignty and security. Such provocative and dangerous acts are the root cause for the security issues on the sea. China urges the U.S. to stop such dangerous, provocative acts. China will take resolute measures to safeguard its sovereignty and security.
Now, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is urging Beijing to step up communication efforts following the fighter jet incident, which he squarely blamed on a Chinese pilot.
First, with regard to the planes, our planes were flying in international airspace on a routine mission. Chinese pilot took dangerous action in approaching the plane very, very closely. There have been a series of these actions directed not just at us, but at other countries in recent months.
The U.S. military stated that a Chinese fighter pilot had performed an unnecessarily aggressive maneuver near their surveillance aircraft operating in the South China Sea. Video footage released by the U.S. military showed the Chinese fighter plane crossing in front of the American aircraft, causing turbulence and then shaking. According to the Indo-Pacific Command, the Chinese plane flew directly in front of the American aircraft, forcing it to fly through its wake turbulence. Adding to the strained relations, the Pentagon recently announced that China had declined a U.S. invitation for Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin to meet his Chinese counterpart in Singapore this week.
But I think it only underscores why it is so important that we have regular, open lines of communication, including, by the way, between our defense ministers. It's regrettable that the meeting that Secretary Austin sought did not go forward with his Chinese counterpart. But for us, for President Biden, this underscores why it's so important that across the government, at the most senior levels, we are regularly engaged. And as we've said repeatedly, while we have a real competition with China, we also want to make sure that doesn't veer into conflict. And the most important starting point for that are regular lines of communication.
Now, the U.S. military stated that a Chinese fighter pilot had performed an unnecessarily aggressive maneuver near their surveillance aircraft operating in the South China Sea. Video footage released by the U.S. military showed the Chinese fighter plane crossing in front of the American aircraft, causing turbulence and then shaking. According to the Indo-Pacific Command, the Chinese plane flew directly in front of the American aircraft, forcing it to fly through its wake turbulence. Adding to the strained relations, the Pentagon recently announced that China had declined a U.S. invitation. Meanwhile, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin expressed his disappointment over Beijing's refusal to hold a meeting between U.S. and Chinese defense chiefs, calling it unfortunate. Austin's remarks came in the wake of recent provocative behavior exhibited by China, including an incident where they performed an aggressive maneuver near a U.S. surveillance aircraft. Take a look.
Regarding the Chinese declining to meet with me, the Minister of Defense declining to meet with me. I think that's unfortunate, but we're going to continue to do what we are doing in this region and others, and that is to work with like-minded countries who share common values and common goals to continue to promote a free and open Indo-Pacific. And again, you've heard me talk a number of times about the importance of countries with significant capabilities being able to talk to each other so you can manage crises and prevent things from spiraling out of control unnecessarily. And as we take a look at some of the things that China is doing in the international airspace in the region and the international waterways, the provocative intercepts of our aircraft and also our allies' aircraft, that's very concerning, and we would hope that they would alter their actions. But since they haven't yet, I'm concerned about at some point having an incident that could very, very quickly spiral out of control.
The U.S. had suggested a meeting between Defense Chiefs Li Shangfu and Lloyd Austin at the upcoming Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore. However, Beijing declined the meeting, citing difficulties in military communication and stating that the U.S. understands the reasons behind these challenges. In the incident, video footage released by the U.S. military showed a Chinese fighter plane crossing in front of the American aircraft, causing turbulence and visibly shaking the U.S. aircraft. However, China's military claimed that the U.S. jet had broken into a military training area. The breakdown in communication between the U.S. and China is causing concern among U.S. officials who worry about the increased risk of unintended conflicts between the two countries. Both nations have active military presence in the Asia-Pacific region, making effective communication vital to prevent any inadvertent escalation. In tonight's other news, over 16,000 people in Nova Scotia, Canada, had to leave their homes, according to officials. Now, that's because of a massive wildfire that's causing havoc all over the country. This particular fire is threatening Halifax. The Premier of Nova Scotia, Tim Houston, said the whole province is pretty tense, and the Mayor of Halifax, meanwhile, Mike Savage, called this fire situation unprecedented for a city of 430,000 people. Take a look.
Meeting with Nova Scotians that have been impacted and those on the front lines of fighting these fires, it's really been heartbreaking. There's definitely a lot of helplessness out there across the province right now, and to be honest, in many ways, I feel that too. Unprecedented resources are being used because these fires are unprecedented, but the effort that's going into the response is significant. And of course, in an effort to protect the resources that are fighting the fires, we have banned all travel and activities in the woods, and we have in place province-wide burn bans. Yesterday, I told you there were 6 burns overnight. There had been 6 burns the overnight before. Last night, at least 8. At least 8 more reckless people chose to burn. And I just want to say that effective immediately, anyone who burns in this province, anyone who disrespects the province-wide burn ban, I can be subject to a $25,000 fine. The forests are simply too dry. The conditions are too volatile. We can't accept any more risk of additional fires.
The fire has been going wild along the northwest side of the city, and it's been out of control. The authorities declared a state of emergency late Sunday, and the folks living in the suburbs had to leave at a moment's notice. On TV, they showed these huge columns of smoke, and some houses and cars were completely destroyed by the fire. Luckily, no one got hurt. Savage mentioned in a press conference that the evacuation zone hasn't expanded since yesterday, which gives a bit of hope that things might be getting under control. But still, he warned everyone that it is still a dangerous situation of the city, and it's been out of control. The authorities declared a state of emergency late Sunday, and the folks living in the suburbs had to leave at a moment's notice. On TV, they showed these huge columns of smoke, and some houses and cars were completely destroyed by the fire. Luckily, no one got hurt. Savage mentioned in a press conference that the evacuation zone hasn't expanded since yesterday, which gives a bit of hope that things might be getting under control. But still, he warned everyone that it is still a dangerous situation. Came from. Hopefully that will help contain it. But here's the not so great news. They're also saying it'll take a good amount of rain to actually get these wildfires in Nova Scotia under control. Unfortunately, there's no rain in the forecast for this week. To give you an idea of how widespread this issue is, wildfires are happening in 8 out of the 13 Canadian provinces and territories. Western Canada has been getting hit by extreme weather a lot lately, and it seems like it's all connected to global warming, which is causing the weather to become more intense and more frequent. There are around 6,615 Filipinos in Nova Scotia, according to a 2021 census. President Marcos Jr. highlighted the need for the government to step up its efforts in achieving the country's rice self-sufficiency target of 97.4%. During an interview in Pasay City, the president mentioned that he recently organized a meeting at the National Irrigation Administration's Convention Hall in Quezon City. The purpose was to bring together various stakeholders from the rice industry and discuss initiatives related to consolidation and digitalization with the aim of enhancing the rice sector.
This is ang aming ginawang target is 97.4, call it 97.5% self-sufficiency by 2028. By ang 97% is sufficient. You do not have to really go to 100% kasi yung 3% iba yung mga niche products. Yung mga organic, yung mga special na grain, Japanese rice, yung mga ganun. Yun, hindi na natin kailangan i-provide yun. Pero at 97%, masasabi na natin, mapapakain na natin lahat ng ating kababayan ng may sapat na bigas na supply. So that's what we talked about. We talked about the consolidation of the farmers. Dahil ang unang hakbang na kailangan natin gawin para magkaroon ng increased production at saka ibaba ang presyo ng produksyon ay kailangan i-mechanize. Hindi ka makapag-mechanize kung ang inaararo mo is only 0.6 hectares. Ganun kuminsan, ganun lang yung lupa. So, siguro, kuliglig lang ang pwede mong gamitin. Hindi mo pwedeng gamitin yung tractor na malalaki, which is very efficient. They can harvest 40 hectares in a day. So these are the kinds of things that we were talking about. Also the digitalization, so that we provide good data to our farmers, the farmer leaders, and mga cooperatives. So we are trying to consolidate the farms so that we can take full advantage of the economies of scale of the new technologies. Napag-usapan din natin, speaking of new technologies, is bringing down the average age of the Filipino farmer. And to do that, again, we engage them with new technologies because they will be the ones who will operate those systems, those new technological systems. And that will make it interesting for young people to come into the sectors.
The president mentioned that one of the key features of the new roadmap is the consolidation of farmlands, which aims to improve the efficiency of farm mechanization. President Marcos further highlighted the government's plan to attract and train more young Filipino farmers in utilizing agricultural technologies. This gathering at the NIA office took place shortly after a courtesy visit from executives of the Thai conglomerate Charon Pokpan Group, or CP Group, to Malacañang Palace in Manila. During the meeting, the CP Group expressed their keen interest in investing approximately $2.5 billion to provide a significant boost to the Philippines' agriculture sector. A new report from the International Labour Organization sheds light on some pressing issues, stating that developing countries are getting hit hard by interrelated problems. Rising debt levels, worsened by the COVID pandemic, are causing trouble, major trouble, and it's making the global employment gap between high-income and low-income countries even wider, while also amplifying existing inequalities. Take a look.
Our world continues to face a complex combination of shocks and threats. Together, these mutually reinforcing crises have compromised prospect for labour market recovery. And without labour market recovery, we cannot have a sound economic and social recovery.
According to the ILO Monitor on the World of Work 11th edition, global unemployment is expected to drop below pre-pandemic levels this year, reaching 191 million people, which corresponds to a global unemployment rate of 5.3%. However, low-income countries are way behind in the recovery process and are struggling to catch up. Apart from just looking at unemployment rates, the ILO has come up with a new indicator called the jobs gap. It provides a more comprehensive measure of the number of people who want to work but can't find employment, especially in developing countries.
So I think one of the first headlines is that we have a growing global employment divide. So the whole story of uneven recovery continues when it comes to labor market recovery. The second, and this is evidenced by the data on old age pensions, is really to show that investing in social protection makes economic sense. There's actually gain in terms of GDP over a relatively short period of time in ensuring old-time pension. And I think the third message is when you look at the least developed countries and the kind of toxic mix of crises from debt distress to high interest rates and inflation, it really calls for these concerns to become a very urgent part in considering the reforms of the financial institutions and the architecture.
The ILO predicts that low-income countries in Africa and the Arab region won't be able to bounce back to pre-pandemic unemployment levels this year. If you thought New York City was just the city that never sleeps, here's something that might keep you up at night. It's also sinking. A recent study has found that the Big Apple is gradually descending, partly due to the weight of its iconic skyscrapers that define the concrete jungle. Now, this sinking phenomenon poses a significant threat to the city's vulnerability to rising sea levels and coastal flooding, a consequence of climate change. The study, published in the Earth's Future Journal, aimed to assess the impact of New York's extensive infrastructure on subsidence. Subsidence refers to the sinking of land caused by various factors, including natural processes like erosion or human activities such as mineral extraction. In the case of New York, geologists estimated that the city's more than 1 million buildings exert a total downward pressure of a staggering 1.68 trillion pounds on the earth. To put it into perspective, that's equivalent to the weight of approximately 1.9 million fully fueled Boeing 747-400s, as reported by CNN. The study concluded that the financial capital of America is sinking at an average rate of 1 to 2 millimeters per year. However, New York is not alone in facing this challenge. Other major cities, such as Venice, are grappling with subsidence and rising waters that raise concerns about eventual submersion. Likewise, Jakarta is sinking at an alarming pace due to excessive groundwater extraction, leading Indonesia to make plans for relocating its capital. And finally, in our news, in a heartwarming initiative to support individuals with dementia, residents at a care home in Singapore came together to hold hands and dance to beloved classics from the past. With the help of a silent music format, they swayed and grooved to golden oldies spanning the 1940s to the 1980s, all while enjoying the music through their headphones. Take a look.
It turns my eye to see King Stella, Stella.
This wonderful idea was brought to life by Johnson Saw, a Singaporean and former music executive who established his own company offering music programs tailored for seniors. The motivation behind starting this came from Saw's personal experience as he witnessed the positive impact music had on his father after he was diagnosed with dementia.
I think music moves the soul. Music is intrinsic in everybody. Everybody has a soundtrack to their lives, right? So there's always some music that would have impacted you sometime during your life. Those are music that get the seniors that they enjoy so much. So Mandarin songs, English songs, Hokkien songs, Cantonese songs, and actually this is one of the popular songs that they really enjoy.
As Singapore grapples with the challenges posed by its aging population and increasing dementia rates, initiatives like this provide a much-needed source of comfort and enjoyment. The Ministry of Health estimates that around 86,000 individuals, which accounts for 1 in 10 people aged 60 and above, currently live with dementia in Singapore. Now, this number is expected to rise to 152,000 by 2030. Research has indicated that music therapy can be particularly beneficial for those with conditions like Alzheimer's disease, the most common form of dementia, which often brings memory loss, communication difficulties, and cognitive challenges.
We play like old songs, and then they help to trigger the memories and emotions of our residents that are often associated with certain memories from their past. So this helps to provide a sense of familiarity and comfort for our residents. And studies have generally shown that musical programs do have positive outcomes on persons with dementia in terms of their overall well-being, cognition, and emotion.
Amidst the rhythmic melodies, the dancing uncles and aunties at Apex Harmony Lodge found solace in their nostalgic journey, singing along to the timeless classic, Que Sera Sera by Doris Day.
It turns my eye to see King Stella, Stella.
As my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angela. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.
We're working to connect a region of over 600 bridges between our lands.